90% of the food she was eating day in, day out, she was reactive to because she's not getting any of the variety. So if you're eating the same thing every single day and you have leaky gut, the likelihood of you being sensitive to the things you're eating all the time is much more significant.
Our returning guest, Margaret Barry, we recorded an interview a while back and she shared that her two favorite tests are the GI Map stool test and the MRT food sensitivity test. I volunteered, my blood and my poop, and we went over the results in the last episode, so please go check that out. Today, we're going to dive into what I need to do about those results.
The thing with genetics is it doesn't tell you what's actually happening. It tells you probability, which is helpful. But I want to be looking not just at probability, but at what's actually happening. One of the classic examples of this is
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. So you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. I am again happy and maybe a little bit nervous about our returning guest, Margaret Barry, on this podcast. Actually, this will be the third time she's been on the podcast. We recorded an interview a while back and she shared that her two favorite tests are the GI Map stool test and the MRT food sensitivity test. I volunteered, my blood and my poop, and we went over the results in the last episode, so please go check that out. Today, we're going to dive into what I need to do about those results. A little bit about Margaret. She teaches fellow practitioners the same strategy she has used to get her clients life-changing results through her company, Restorative Wellness Solutions. She is an FNTP, a MRWP, a GAPS practitioner, a certified healing food specialist, and a certified gluten practitioner. She is also the author of Eat Naked, Unprocessed, Unpolluted, and Undressed Eating for Healthier, Sexier You, and a co-author of a follow-up cookbook. Margaret, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to dig in again.
So we went over my food sensitivities. That's probably the thing that stood out, although you're probably going to be fixing the other one. But the thing that stood out is grapes, sensitivity. I like wine, cranberry. Interestingly, and maybe this is true and maybe we'll get into this, but two of the key ones were garlic and ginger, which I literally eat in every single meal. And I grate it up a lot. I don't know. So I have been enjoying my garlic and ginger for fear that it will be removed from my diet in perpetuity, which I don't think is true, but at least for fear of that. So let's jump in. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So number one, nothing here that we're doing is in perpetuity. I just want to be super clear about that. And I think it's a really important piece that it's funny when I way back in the day, like in my early 20s, did a process like this with a practitioner. She sent me home with a food list. And I don't know if she either didn't say, but it certainly didn't register that this was a temporary thing. This was a healing process. But I basically went home and cried thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to eat normal food for the rest of my life, right? It's not like that. This is a short-term pain for long-term gain. Like I'm not in the business of creating restrictive diets. Not at all. Like I want you to be able to eat as many things as possible and be completely symptom-free. And so I thought I'd start off with just a little recap for those.
Let me just add to that, because as you were saying that, I was thinking, I did an interview with a lady who had rheumatoid arthritis, and she solved it. She's Indian heritage. One of the things that she had to cut out was rice. And I was like, so how was that? And so I've actually been sharing with people, listen, go do these things. It doesn't mean you can't have it ever again, right? It doesn't mean you can't. And so I know this, and still knowing my sensitivities causes this. So I just wanted to reinforce that, because I think it's really important. Even when you know it, you might have these fears. It's okay. We'll get through this together.
Yeah. I think that's really important and awesome that you just acknowledged that, because it doesn't matter how much expertise you have in this field, how many people you've talked to, how much you know. the emotional response is big and real. And we have to acknowledge that and recognize that we eat food for a heck of a lot more than just nourishment and, caloric intake and macros and, all those things. Like those are really important pieces, but we eat food because it's comforting. We eat food because it is distracting. We eat food because it's social. Like there's just so many, it's so much more than just food. So we need to really recognize that when we're dealing with it, whether you're the individual who's making the dietary changes or whether you're the individual making those recommendations. I think it's really, really important to remember that there is going to be an emotional impact to these things. So
Yeah,
glad you brought that up.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So I thought I'd just do a quick recap of what we saw on your test so that it reminds us of what we're going to be addressing here. And, you're a really healthy guy already. You're not coming to me the way most of my clients are coming to me having, years and years of chronic illness that we need to turn around. You're very much in an optimizing situation. But two key things jumped out at me when we talked last week and looking through your health history. Number one is this is a significant goal of maintaining and increasing muscle mass, because that's so important for longevity and health. And secondly, was the mention of some joint discomfort, right? So, and those are both things that are now, those are kind of like the main goals I see in terms of like what we want to be achieving here. And so we did these two tests side by side. The GI map was the stool test that gives us a really good idea of what's going on in your gut. And then we did the food sensitivity test, which is going to help us identify and temporarily remove foods.
Temporarily adjust ever so for a short minute, like you almost had to say it 8 times. Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to basically it helps us identify those foods that right now are triggering an inflammatory process in your body. As I said, that's not a forever thing. Now we might find one or two things that your body is just like, hard no. Right? And that happens, but it's one or two things. It's not like this long, complicated list like what we're going to go through today. So on the stool test, we found some interesting things. First and foremost, we found that elevated H. pylori, which can impact your body's ability to absorb protein. And we know that using the protein that you're eating so much of in your diet is really essential to muscle protein synthesis, among many, many other things. And so that's something, you're not symptomatic of H. pylori, but it's something that we want to be thinking about, especially because it directly correlates to one of your key goals. Now, you're doing a fantastic job. So this might just be a fine tuning. It also might be a getting ahead of something that could turn into an issue down the road. So, but is it worth addressing given what your goals? 100%. We saw in your beneficial bacteria, we saw a couple of low beneficials. So this is in your microbiome. We think of these as the flowers in your gut garden. We saw some that are struggling a little bit. So just evidence of a little bit of, imbalance in your microbiome. Alongside that, we saw elevations in 2 of your opportunistic. So these look like the weeds in your gut garden. And interestingly, the 2 that are overtly elevated are ones that often result from digestive malfunction further upstream. So could this be partly, at least, a result, a downstream result of that H. pylori, which suppresses hydrochloric acid production and is a really, basically affects that digestive function? Could be related to that. We also saw the presence of Citrobacter, which is highly inflammatory, opportunistic. So it's like an extra potent weed. And then we saw elevations of a parasite, this Blastocystis hominis, which I will say is the number one parasite that I see in my practice. And for you, it's not causing overt symptoms, although interesting that you noticed some GI distress the day that you took the test. But again, this could be a downstream result of that H. pylori, because what is the first line of defense against any kind of orally ingested pathogens like parasites? It's nice and robust levels of HCl, hydrochloric acid, which the H. pylori will affect. So we saw then, your fat digestion is looking really strong. We saw slightly suboptimal levels of one of your primary enzymes, which could be, again, downstream of all of this dysfunction we're seeing in terms of your protein digestion. Interestingly, we saw really elevated SIGA. This is like your gut army, your gut immunity. And when we see that elevated, the question is, well, what's engaging the army? And we have a bunch of suspects here. We have the parasite, we have the H. pylori, and as we'll talk about in a moment, we have those, the food sensitivities. And then we saw elevated anti-gliadin antibodies, and you shared that you do consume gluten, not every day, but at least on a weekly basis. And right now, that is not something your body is liking. And then we saw a little bit more further evidence of immune engagement and a bit of inflammation, just things creeping up right there with slight elevations in the eosinophil activation protein and calprotectin, which is your inflammation marker. So all in all, what we're seeing is we are seeing imbalances. Now, you asked a question last week, and I just want to reiterate that, like, if we did this test the next day, would we get exactly the same results? Very likely no, because the microbiome is a living dynamic organism. You could be taking a different part of the poop and you might get different results, right? But we still use the information that we have in front of us. What we do know with this test is there is H. pylori there. We saw it. There is blasto there. There is citrobacter. Like, so it's not adding things that aren't there. Could there be other things at play? Possibly, but this gives us a lot to work with. And then we looked at the food sensitivities, right? And what we saw is a bunch of things that you do eat on the daily, right? I'm not going to go through the entire list, but things like salmon, you eat pretty regularly. You already mentioned the garlic and the ginger, cranberry, grape. So when we're thinking grape, we're thinking balsamic vinegars, wine, right? Like, so there are certain things here that are definitely a regular part of your diet. We also saw wheat was a really high sensitivity. So double whammy there. We're seeing gluten on the GI stool test, and we're seeing wheat on the food sensitivity test. So what I want to do is I want to go through what we're going to do about it. And I want to kind of break down how we think about a protocol, but I see you have a question.
Yeah, I did have so I think looking at the GI tract and like identifying what species are there and are there amoebas and all that stuff makes perfect sense. Like, you just check for DNA, or is it, maybe it's a DNA, whatever the test is, right? When you start thinking about food sensitivities, how does that work, right? So you've got a blood draw, and you're like, is there little micro dishes of droplets of blood, and then they're exposing it to grape juice, and then they're like, oh, grape juice, not good. Like, what does that look
I'll tell
like?
you exactly how this particular test works. They all work a little bit differently, and we could take hours just to go through the different methods and the different labs. But I'll tell you what this one does. So they take your blood, and it's 4 vials that they took, and they separate it into 176 different little tiny test tubes, along with a bunch of others for controls. And what they do is so this is the MRT 176. So then in each one of those, they introduce the substance. Maybe that's the garlic or the ginger, or there are some, we saw that there are some different chemicals that they're looking at, like caffeine or benzoic acid. So they add that substance to the blood. What they're looking for is a change in the ratio of liquids to solids. If you don't add anything here, just add something neutral, there will be no change in the ratio of liquids to solids. The volume of the blood doesn't change, but there will be this change in the ratio. And what that change in the ratio indirectly points to is basically the release of these mediators, the cytokines, the prostaglandins, the histamine. These are what I think of as like the agents of inflammation. These are the little guys that go out there and cause symptoms like joint pain. For somebody else, it could be skin issues. It could be headaches. It could be brain fog. It could be, fill in the blank of just about any symptom that has inflammation as its root. It could be, if not directly causing it, exacerbating it. It's like just adding this additional inflammatory burden, right? So that's what it's doing. And what it's looking for is the ratio, like how much did we see in a change of that liquids to solids? Is it just a tiny little bit, which is a very mild reaction? Or was it like, oh, wow, like things got busy in here, and that's going to be a much more severe reaction. And then there's the reactions in the middle. So what this test does is it allows us to see on this gradient from least reactive to most reactive based on each individual food. It's not dependent on whether you've eaten the food in the last couple of weeks, as a lot of tests are. Any antibody test, you need to have consumed the food in the week or two prior to eating it or to doing the test. There's a lot of foods in here, and I don't care how varied your diet is, it'll be a project to get every single one of these in here. I've done tests where, with small children, and they're reactive to foods that they haven't even eaten yet, right? Like, so it's, it can help guide, it can help guide a lot of different things. But what we're seeing here, your experience, it's funny, sometimes one of the things we see happen is all the foods that are listed, the individual's like, ugh, I don't like that. Ugh, I don't like that. Ugh, whenever I eat that, I get this weird reaction. So they kind of instinctively know. the other end of the spectrum, often what happens is it's like, oh, wow, yeah, I eat that every single day. I remember I had a client once who she was just on a very regimented program. She was, an actor in LA, like really, trainer had put her like at this, 10 o'clock, she eats 15 blueberries. And, like it was so regimented, and it was the exact same thing day in, day out. And 90% of the food she was eating day in, day out, she was reactive to, because she's not getting any of the variety. And if we have a compromised gut, we have that leaky gut, that's one of the mechanisms whereby your body will build and develop a food sensitivity. So if you're eating the same thing every single day and you have leaky gut, the likelihood of you being sensitive to the things you're eating all the time is much more significant.
Yeah, that was part of it, but you gave a great example of you've seen children who are sensitive to foods that they've literally never tried before,
Yeah.
which kind of begs the question for me, could you also look at this at the genetic level, right? Like, could you say, are there genetic tests that are like,
Yeah.
hey, you're going to be sensitive to strawberries and blueberries or whatever, like, and do you, I think you've landed on this test versus that test, but talk a little bit about why you landed here.
One of the things that with genetics, I love genetics and I do extensive genetic testing, but I don't do extensive genetic testing of what you're describing. And there are tests, and I'm not able to speak to the mechanism specifically, but there are tests that will tell you exactly what you're talking about. The thing with genetics is it doesn't tell you what's actually happening. It tells you probability, which is helpful.
Yeah.
But I want to be looking not just at probability, but at what's actually happening. Right. And you can have, and one of the classic examples of this is, people will do their genetics and they'll discover that they have methylation SNPs. And then they run to go support their methylation pathways. But it's like, whoa, hang on a second. You have the predisposition. That doesn't mean they're not working properly. Let's look at your homocysteine. Let's look at these other blood markers to see what's happening right now in your blood. And if we're seeing that elevated, then okay, yes, we know there's a genetic predisposition and we see your body struggling with methylation, we're going to support it. And likely this is a lifetime support because there's a genetic predisposition here, but we don't just rush to support things based on genetics. Now, there's times where you see like strong predispositions and it checks out with family history and you're like, oh, wow, I'm going to focus on I know mine, my genetics, my inflammation pathways are just lit up. My oxidative stress pathways lit up. My detox pathways lit up. So these are things that I prioritize in my regular maintenance protocol, but I'm not like putting myself on aggressive detoxes 24/7 because of it. Do you know what I mean? Like so we always want to be balancing predisposition with what's actually happening.
It's kind of theory versus practice, right? The theory is like you're likely to be sensitive and we can actually know that. So why don't we test that? And then that's why it's your more favorite test than a genetic test. Very cool. All right.
I'll say a big exception to this is if you do genetic testing, for example, for something like celiac disease or something like that. Am I going to say go crazy on gluten? No. I mean, I'm not going to say go crazy on gluten anyways, because my thoughts on gluten, but but that's a situation where it's like you take that genetics, you take those genetics more seriously because you have that genetic predisposition, which is one of the things that's required for developing that autoimmune disease. So why play with fire since, taking gluten out is fairly easy. But when you're talking about one big thing, that's a different situation from talking about a food sensitivity test where you could have 20 different things. And that's a different thing. That's a different ask of the individual from a lifestyle perspective.
Very cool. All right. Well, what do I need to do?
What are we going to do? So when we
How
think
long
about,
do I need to stop garlic and ginger, and then when can I bring them back?
that's the biggest question. Do you want me to jump to that? I will tell you that.
Go through.
I'm going to save it to the end because I am going to tell you that answer. So what we're going to do is I break down my GI healing protocols into distinct categories, and I'm making these recommendations based on a combination of how you're presenting symptomatically, your health goals, and what we're seeing in the labs. So I'm not chasing numbers. Yeah. I'm not just chasing numbers in the labs. I'm really taking into context, like, who are you? How do you already eat? What is it that you're trying to get out of this? And then, and any kind of symptom presentation, like as an example, I am going to bring in a little bit of digestive enzyme support, but I'm not going to go crazy with it. I'm going to go on a much lower dose. We do see the elastase lower than what we'd like to see on the labs, but you're not seeing undigested food in your stool. You've got nice, robust poops. You're not getting cramping, like you're not having symptoms. So I'll bring it in, but at a lower dose, right? So, I start off with thinking about digestive function. And this is a big one for most people, but definitely for you in this situation with that elevated H. pylori. So one of the most important pieces that we're going to do here is we're going to repopulate your hydrochloric acid. That's probably the wrong words. It's not populating. It's not. But what we're going to do is we're going to support your hydrochloric acid production, because we know that H. pylori damages those parietal cells that secrete hydrochloric acid. And this is so important for 1,000,001 different digestive processes. And very specifically in your case, your ability to break down and digest and absorb protein from your diet. So it also, H. pylori thrives in a low acid environment. So part of its damaging of those parietal cells is creating this nice little cozy home for itself. We not only want to get rid of the H. pylori, we want to make sure that we are creating an environment that is not going to encourage it to repopulate. Because that's one of the things you see with H. pylori protocols. People go on the protocol, they just eradicate, like they kill off the H. pylori. Great. They didn't do anything to change the environment that allowed that H. pylori to proliferate in the first place. But that's not us, because I have no interest in you ever having to do this again. I want this to be a once and done. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in hydrochloric acid, and we do this to tolerance. And this is going to be the longest explanation of a supplement, because it's a little cool how this works, and it's a little fancy. And I'm also just going to really say, for those of you listening, please don't try this without a practitioner guidance, because there are a lot of extenuating considerations that I don't have time to go through all the clinical considerations. I have made those in my mind. So this is why I'm recommending it to Chris. You might have things where this is not a good option for you. So I just really want to say that out loud, because people rush off to get their hydrochloric acid, and there's times where it really could do damage. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a very, very low dose. And the product that I like, it's called Hydrozyme from Biotics Research. I'll send you the information on this afterwards. It's very low dose, lower dose than you could find if you just bought something off the shelf at Whole Foods. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off at 1 per meal. So this is something you only take when you're eating. It's supporting your body's ability to digest the food you're eating. What we're going to do is you're going to take 1 per meal for 3 days. At day 4, you're going to take 2 per meal. And you're going to do that for the next 3 days. And you're going to keep slowly titrating up like this. Now, there might be people who are listening to this going like, wait a second, I did this once and I just titrated up within a meal. Yeah, there's ways. Some people go really aggressively. I like to go nice and slowly, especially because there is this presence of H. pylori. You're totally asymptomatic. So I don't think you're going to have any symptoms, but I still want to go nice and slowly. It increases the ability of your body to respond and tolerate and all the good things. So we're going to go super, super slowly. So what's going to happen is at some point, and if this happens when you take the first 1 per meal, just stop and let me know, and we'll have a plan B. I don't think that's going to happen at just 1 per meal, because it's such a low dose. And I want to say, take it after the first few bites of food. I wouldn't, like while you're making dinner, take it and then wait 20 minutes. Like you want to take it with eating. And I would give your body, like, take a few bites of food, ideally protein, and then take it. But also, if you forget and it's 30 minutes later, it's too late. Like it's with your meal. Really, really important. So, what's going to happen is at some point, you're going to feel a slight warming. Now, the symptoms can look a little bit different from person to person, but the most common is you feel a slight warming, like a little bit like the beginning of heartburn. Because what we're doing is we're dosing you and we're trying to find your upper limit. So we're going to go a little too high and then we're going to pull back. But we have to figure out the too high. How most people do this is they just do what's on the bottle, and it might be way too high, or it might be not enough is normally the case. It's not remotely enough. And it's not actually doing what we want it to do. We want to get it nice, and we want to get it right to that upper threshold and then bring it down. So now I'm recommending a super low dose product. You might get to 5 or 6 of these per meal and then feel the warming that I'm talking about, kind of like you just took a shot of whiskey. Like, it's not going to throw you into major heartburn or anything like that. It's going to be mild. Sometimes it's just like a little discomfort kind of in that upper GI. Now, if you get to 5, or let's say you get to 6 and you feel that discomfort, perfect. You go back down to 5. You feel nothing, right? Like next meal, you go down to 5, that's your dose. Now, ideally, at some point, you keep taking 5. One day, you feel that warming again. You're like, oh, there it is. Next meal, you go down to 4. So what we're doing is we're priming the pump. We're helping your body, we're supplementing with hydrochloric acid, but hydrochloric acid is made up of amino acids, zinc, like all these things that you actually need hydrochloric acid to access from your diet. So we're priming the pump, and the ideal scenario is that your body then tapers you off of it. Now, there's a very real possibility you get to 5 or 6 of these super low dose and you feel nothing. And in that case, we want to keep going, but this is becoming an absurd number of pills. So there is a higher dose version from that same company called betaine plus HP. And the rough equivalent is 1 of the high dose is equivalent to 5 of the low dose.
Okay.
And you just keep going like that. Now, here's what I'll say. If you get to 6 of the high dose and you feel nothing, that's as high as we go. Just hold there. And there's other strategies we can do to help support you, bring you into parasympathetic. Like there's other things that we can do. But you will you might feel it between then, between 1 and 6.
Yeah.
And then do the same thing. So if you get to 5 of the high dose, you feel the warming, go down to 4 of the high dose. Some people get really they want to fine tune it, right? Like they'll do, 1 of the high dose and then they start it going up incrementally with the low dose. To me, that's so complicated. If you like that, feels more comfortable with it, go for it. Totally not necessary. You can start jumping up. I mean, most of the stuff, the high dose one is the average of what you would get if you just bought it off the shelf at Whole Foods. The low dose, we're just going very, very conservatively to begin with. And this is going to be one of the most important things you do throughout the entire protocol because it's supporting that protein digestion and it's creating an environment that is very unfavorable for the H. pylori to come back.
Awesome.
Okay.
I love the scientific approach of titrating up is pretty awesome. I'm excited.
The next one we're going to do is it's a product called Critical Digestion. It's just a lovely global enzyme support. We'll just do that at 1 per meal. And then the next section of things I like to think about. So that was digestive function. I'm not going to bring in, sometimes I bring in gallbladder support, but you're not having any issues with fat digestion or nausea or sort of detox issues. So we don't really need to do that. I do always want to bring in something to kind of heal and seal the gut. And the product that I'm going to recommend is from Designs for Health. It's called GI Revive. They have a powder version, which I like better. If you really don't like the taste of it or you have too many powders in your life, you can do a capsule version. I just like the powder. It feels like it kind of accesses everything better. And it's just healing and soothing the digestive tract the whole way, mouth to anus. It's lovely. And you'll just do a small scoop in the morning and in the evening. I like to do this. This is one that I recommend you just keep in the bathroom. And you just do it first thing when you get up in the morning and last thing before you go to bed at night.
Okay. So 2 per day.
Yeah. The next is for microbiome rebalancing. I'm going to bring in my favorite probiotic to start with. It's called Megaspore Biotic. Maybe you've come across this. It's from Microbiome Labs. It's working a little differently from the way a lot of probiotics work in that it's not just sort of whack-a-mole approach trying to give you some of the individual species that you're low in. It's more about reestablishing the terrain such that it favors the growth of the beneficials and discourages the growth of the opportunist. So it's more of a terrain strategy. I like it a lot. You can also take it with meals, which simplifies things a lot. So I'll have you take 2 of these with dinner. Now, some things I'm not going to directly, we saw that elevated SIGA. I'm not going to bring in some kind of immune calming support. That is not the strategy. The strategy is we've identified a whole bunch of different things that could be triggering and engaging that immune system. We're going to remove those and kind of calm the whole system down. And then if on retesting we see that SIGA still really elevated, then we'll come in with some more sort of specific and direct support. But right now, both because I don't want to be just overwhelmed. It's a robust protocol. We got a bunch of things to do here. So I don't want to do things gratuitously. And oftentimes we see this come right back into balance without needing to directly support it. It's asking that bigger question. It's not just being like, oh, SIGA is high, we got to bring it down. It's like, well, why is it high? What's keeping it so busy? Let's remove those things and see what the immune system does in and of itself. Make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. So I do want to do some eradication. And I have 2 tiers of this. And this is where I'm going to ask you to kind of check in with your instincts. So the one that I think is we really want to go after is that H. pylori. To me, that's just given your symptoms, given your goals to me. And it's also, I'm going to use, there's different H. pylori protocols. You are so asymptomatic. I'm going to go really gently with this one. It's another product by that company, Microbiome Labs. It's called PyloGuard. And it's really cool. It's actually a denatured bacteria that acts as like a sponge. And it's a binder that's very specific to H. pylori only. So it's just like it sort of grabs it and takes it out of your system. And so we'll do that. It's basically one capsule in the morning. You just open it up and sprinkle the contents into a little thing of water. I use like a shot glass and then just take it. And it doesn't taste that bad. Even my kids have done it when they had snake right back in the day. So my kids can do it, anybody can do it. Yeah.
Even kids will take it.
Yeah, which is not the case with most eradication agents, let me tell you.
Oh.
So that is what I think is the kind of the non-negotiable in this.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Now, the comprehensive strategy would be to deal with both that parasite and the citrobacter, the inflammatory, and especially because we're seeing that SIGA. So I lean to, the clinician in me leans to getting rid of it just because we're seeing also those elevations in the SIGA, and it's really elevated right now. It's not just like, oh, here's lab range and it's a few points above. It's like, 2 times, 3 times the upper range. So it's significant. Hang tight. I've got your test results right here. Yeah, the upper, it's like 2.5 times the upper range. So, it's significantly elevated. So let me tell you what this would involve if you want to go that length. And then but I'm a big believer in you checking in with your own instincts. So if there's a part of you that's just like, yep, that sounds right, that resonates, we go for it. If there's a part of you that's just like, whoa, way too much, not, it feels overwhelming, then let's not. Like it's not. If you were symptomatic, different thing. But we're not just chasing numbers here. We're thinking about the whole person. So if we were to go after this, and what I've done is, for each piece of these, like for the H. pylori and then the dysbiotic bacteria and then the parasite, you could do quite robust protocols for all 3 of those. What I'm doing is kind of picking products that that will support both of different things.
Okay. Yeah.
So, one is called GI Microbex, which is a product from Designs for Health. And it is, multiple different agents that are sort of herbals that will eradicate both the dysbiotic bacteria, that citrobacter, as well as the parasite. It's both kind of an antiparasitic and an antimicrobial. The next one is called AP Traveler. This is actually an Ayurvedic formula that is really effective with parasites. And I love this combination, the GI Microbex from Designs for Health and AP Traveler from Ayush Herbs. That combination together, especially with Blasto, has been really, really powerful. And the way we dose these is each of them 3 each, twice a day away from food. Now you do this very long fasting window, so we might be able to do both of them within that. We just have to, there's going to be some timing considerations if you want to go and do this full thing. Now, alongside that, I would bring in what's called monolaurin Avail. And monolaurin is something that has been very effective with H. pylori. It's also helpful with the parasite, and it's as a biofilm disruptor. So that's kind of, because I like to bring in a biofilm disruptor when I'm working with antiparasitics in particular, dysbiotic bacteria as well sometimes, but definitely with parasites. And so that's doing multiple things, right? It's acting as this biofilm disruptor, and it is supporting the H. pylori. And that's 2 twice a day away from food. So you would be taking these 3 agents together, the GI Microbex, the AP Traveler, and the monolaurin Avail. And it's a bunch, it's 8 pills because it's 3 of one, 3 of the next, and 2 of the other. You take those twice a day away from food. So it's robust.
Yeah.
Right.
How far away from food? Like, what does that look like? So
away from food means at least 30 minutes, maybe an hour before food, but minimum 30 minutes before eating. And then at least an hour and a half after your last meal.
Okay. And so is there any kind of, I'm assuming that there's no kind of stomach, digestive discomfort if you were to take them in the middle of a 16-hour fast or something, or is that not recommended?
No, it's not. It shouldn't. I mean, well, so I can't guarantee no discomfort. And this is what I'm going to share with you next how I want you to layer these in, because I am very conservative and intentional because it's a robust protocol. We do this. It's not like you start this and you're taking every single thing day one. We're going to layer it in one at a time to give your body the opportunity to adapt. Also, if you react to something, we'll figure it out right away. It's a pain in the tushy if you've taken everything and then you have some weird reaction. We don't know what it is. Stop everything anyways and reintroduce. So I like to go nice and slowly.
And there is, my impression was that there is some theory that fixing the H. pylori issue could correct this downstream. Is that an idea that I made up?
Yeah. Well, it's not that it made no. So the two are definitely related. So addressing the H. pylori will help to create an environment that's inhospitable for that H. pylori to proliferate, and B, will also, now that you have the full amount of hydrochloric acid with your meals, both a combination of your body's natural production and the supplementation, if there's the introduction of a subsequent if you ingest another parasite, which frankly we're all exposed to, you don't have to travel to some exotic place in order to be exposed, then it can prevent that from actually kind of taking hold in your gut. Now, it's not an eradication agent in and of itself for the H. pylori. So theoretically, the answer is no. Can this address it? What I will say clinically is sometimes, because for some people trying to do all of this at once would be way too much. So we would just start with the H. pylori, and then on retest, sometimes it's like, it went away. Now, did it 100% go away? Did we get a stool sample that just didn't have it? Like, there's a lot of different questions, but if they're not symptomatic and we don't see it on the test, I'm not going to put them through a parasite protocol just for the sake of putting them through a parasite protocol. You know what I mean? So, and that's another approach, is that we just address the H. pylori. We leave it at that. We really focus on getting that HCl nice and robust. And then I am going to recommend a retest, and we'll talk about the strategy for that in a second, but I am definitely going to recommend a retest so we make sure we did what we set out to do. And at that point, if the parasite is persisting, then it wouldn't be a bad idea to get rid of it. And your SIGA is still elevated, right? Like, these are the different pieces of the puzzle. But right now, given that you're not symptomatic, we could wait.
What would you recommend?
Straight up clinical recommendation based on that SIGA, I'd probably go after it.
Okay.
I will answer the question in terms of if it was me. If I saw this on the lab, I would be like, with that, if the SIGA wasn't that elevated, I probably wouldn't be as hot and bothered about it. But because that's so elevated, it's like, and the thing that's living in the intestines that is probably causing the most havoc is likely the blasto. So that would be my... Yeah.
That makes perfect. There's part of me that the scientist wants to play around and go like, hey, let's play around with the H. pylori, get rid of that, and see what happens. And then another consideration is the testing, right? Like, so if we're going to do another test, and each test has a cost, then let's get rid of everything, and so we have more confidence in being clear on the second test. I think that makes a lot of sense.
100%. So the overall strategy here is to introduce one at a time. Again, every 3 days. And that just allows your body to adjust to the changes. It increases the likelihood that you tolerate everything, because it just gives your body time to kind of acclimate. And if your body is like, don't like that one, we learn that very quickly, and it's really easy to identify. So that's going to be my recommendation. And then what happens is, once you hit the full protocol, then that starts the clock for 3 months. Okay. And then the protocol is 3 months. And then what happens at the 3-month mark is we start pulling things away. And I don't know how much you want to go into that now, because that's kind of an in the future conversation. And I'm happy to come back here when we're at that point. We can, if you want to have the whole series of this. Sick of hearing
welcome again, Margaret, for her 15th episode.
Right? But basically, what we'll do is we start to phase out certain key supplements, right? Like, so we pull out the eradication agents at that 3-month mark. And then a couple weeks later, we pull out the probiotic. And then, 3 days before you do the test, we pull out everything. So that you're not, because I don't want you to be taking the eradication agents when you're doing the test, because then of course it is going to come back nice and clean because you're taking all these supplements. And the goal is not to have you on all these supplements for the rest of your life. The goal is that we get rid of it and it stays gone and you're good, right? Like that's the whole point of this. So this is not a long-term protocol. And I really want to emphasize this. I am not somebody who's going to say, I need you to take 50 supplements a day for the rest of your life. This is a short-term therapeutic approach that we're going to phase out the vast majority of these at the end.
How amazing is that, right? Because it literally is the antithesis of allopathic medicine, like classic allopathic medicine, which is like, you look at Dr. Robert Lufkin, and he wrote the book, The Lies I Taught in Medical School. And they had, at the point that he was on 4 forever medications, right, to address some kind of tendencies towards diabetes and a number of other autoimmune diseases, he was like, there's got to be a better solution. And I'll share this. Did I share the conversation my son had? I did last time, right?
Oh, not your son. I thought you said you and your doctor, who was so surprised.
Me and my doctor, that was fun, right? Like, wow, you're not on any medications.
Yeah.
I didn't realize at 55 I was supposed to be. Like, there's no chart for that. So my conversation with my son, he's ADHD, and his pediatrician retired on a Zoom call with a new pediatrician. And I have been talking to him this whole time. We've never increased his dose. Right, so at this point, he's probably at 25% of the dose given by body weight, and he's never increased the dose. And he's working with us. And I just had him listen to one of the ADHD podcasts I recorded, and so he's like focusing on getting rid of gluten, like, and all this. And so he's on this call, and he was like, I think he was hinting to the doctor that he's going to try and get off of these medications ultimately. And the doctor was like, no, that's not how this works. This is like diabetes. Once you have diabetes, you have it forever. So my son mutes the mic and says to my wife, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And my wife is, you didn't press mute. Also, if you did, I have another microphone here. So like, there are solutions to so many of these things. And the concept of having a protocol and the goal is to stop the protocol at some point, like that, it feels like how it should be.
Well, yeah. I mean, to me, it's just so logical. It makes so much sense, this idea of being on medications and just sort of stacking them up. And it is tragically so unusual to find anybody north of 40 who's not on at least 2 medications. I mean, we're such an over-medicated society. It's crazy. I mean, diabetes, it makes my blood curdle when someone says diabetes, this is forever. It's like, this is a lifestyle disease. Like, there are interventions. Now it gets harder. Yeah. The longer you go, for sure, it gets harder. So I'm not going to, and you also have to do the work. So most people are not going to do the work, but like, it is not, don't just give the like unilateral, everybody must be on this medication for the rest of your life. Yeah. I don't buy it. And on a mission to change that. So
I do have to share, because I think it's important. The parental follow-up is I'm spending some time with my son teaching him how to use mute. So
I love that. Key takeaway. Well, we've talked now about supplements. So I want to talk about the diet. Okay. So I want you to, we saw gluten.
Wait, hold on first. Let me get ready. La.
Honestly, I think it's going to be a lot easier once you have figured out the new strategy. I think it's going to be a lot easier. The hardest time is like the first week or two, as you're like, oh, I normally reach for this. I have to find my alternative, right? So that's going to be what are your alternatives? There are great seasonings out there beyond just garlic and ginger. So number one, I do want you to avoid gluten completely and scrupulously. Like, be the annoying person at the restaurant and ask the questions. Your body doesn't like it. That's likely going to be the one thing that we do that I'm going to recommend in perpetuity. Whether you do it or not, completely up to you. But it's significant.
So I've gone to dinner with a guy with celiac disease, and he's like asking the questions, and like, if they cook gluten on anything like in the same pan before, et cetera. I'm not at that level.
You're
right?
not
Like
at that level.
yeah.
You're not at that level. But if they're like,
Basically,
oh yes,
yeah.
there's some breadcrumbs in the meatballs, you don't do the meatballs. If they
Yeah.
thicken the sauce with flour, you don't do the sauce with flour. But you're not the person who has to like have a separate kitchen. Yeah, that's for very serious celiac. So you're not at that level, but you still need to ask the questions and still need to be more than like you can't just sort of assume things. Like you just have to ask because I'm always surprised. I'll be at a restaurant, and be like, this one isn't marked that it can be gluten free. That doesn't make any sense. And they'll be like, oh, such and such has. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a million other ways to make that without the flour. Why did you have to add flour and make my life harder? So
the thing that surprised me having dinner with this guy, we went to like a Japanese restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't realize that there's gluten in soy sauce. Like that is not intuitive at all. Like it's a kind of a wheat based product, which is
it is, unless you get the tamari. I'm sure you learned that you get the tamari.
That's what I do.
Which is better anyways, because then it's the actually truly fermented as opposed to the industrial soy sauce is like it's sort of chemically fermented, not traditionally fermented that takes time, which then adds expense. So that's part of the reason for some of these things. But yes.
So it's kind of like the sourdough bread. Like I've been seeing some kind of posts about the fact that a lot of commercial sourdough bread is just appeasing the taste of sour, not actually being sourdough.
100%.
Crazy.
100%. I think James just interviewed someone on his podcast about that very topic. There's no regulation about sourdough. Yeah, it's crazy.
And so my understanding, like Dr. Gundry, he's against lectins. Sourdough bread is the only one, but that should be off limits for me, right?
If it's gluten, if you do sourdough gluten-free bread, which you can find and they're delicious, those are phenomenal. But I would stay away from gluten. And there is some, and I don't really understand the chemistry of this because you will find people who will say, oh, the souring process consumes the gluten. I've not had people, unless it's really preference and they're just staying away, they don't actually have any kind of issues when they eat it. I've never had somebody who's actually able to tolerate the gluten-free, the sourdough that still has, that is made from gluten-containing grains. I just haven't seen it in practice. It may be that person exists, but I haven't seen it. So we're going to avoid gluten. You do a ton of fiber-rich foods. I want you to keep doing that. Really important for feeding that microbiome. What we're going to do is, in terms of those MRT food sensitivities, so anything that was red, and red meant highly reactive, those we're going to pull out for a solid 6 months. So I'm not going to read through all your yellows, but I will read through your reds if my cursor will start murking. Here we go. So we've got wheat, cherry, and grape. Probably the biggest annoying one there outside of the wheat is going to be grape, because that means anything that is wine or made from wine.
So it's interesting because I've been cutting back on alcohol because I think that's a good idea for this whole year. And then I went to an event where I was like, I would like to have a drink. Normally I'd have a red wine, not doing red wine. Beer, something
beer's
light that has beer's gluten. And I've recognized a long time ago, I just feel like the blueberry from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Like that's how I feel after a beer. Yeah. So I only drink beer with my brother-in-law, which maybe has to stop now. And then which we don't get together that often. And so I was like, well, I'll just have water, like sparkling water. And
sparkling water is great. If you really do need a drink, tequila is a pretty safe one, especially if it's like really good quality and just like a straight tequila, or a tequila with a squeeze of real lime, not all the sugary stuff. That's kind of the drink of choice for folks.
Any problems with gin or vodka, or those are
you should probably be fine. They do have potato vodka is fine. Gin is made from, I can't remember what, but it's a gluten containing grain, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. It's so funny. Gin is like the one drink I really, really don't like. So I have to confess, I'm very I was going to say racist against gin. I'm very prejudiced against gin because I don't even know what it's made of. Because I don't like it so much. I'm like, how does anyone drink that anyways? Just take it out of your life. It's disgusting.
That's going to be the headline of this podcast.
Oh, God.
Racist against gin.
Oh, God. There you go. Feel the hate coming now. Okay. um,
Yeah,
okay.
whoever hates that is really not listening.
Yeah, totally, totally. Okay, so yellows foods, these are ones that are moderately, they're moderate. So this is the gingers and
Yeah.
the garlics and the vast majority of them here. We're going to pull those out. I pull these out until you do your retest. It's the prize for doing your retest. So basically that'll end up being about 4 months, somewhere between 3 and 4 months. Not the end of the world. It sounds like a really long time. What I'm going to recommend is use the first couple of weeks to figure out your new things, right? Like if you use garlic and ginger on all the things, what is going to be the new way that you season your food that you don't have to think about? Honestly, when you get to reintroduce these, what's delightful is now your whole palette and your repertoire in the kitchen has expanded because you've learned all these creative ways to prepare things that used to prepare, using the ingredients that maybe now you're avoiding. And then when you can reintroduce them, now you just have all these new things that you can do. So it's actually often very, people get upset about taking foods out of their diet. And I'm always like, you know what? We eat very restrictive diets. Like it's a really good opportunity to expand past the usual, right? So if there is a lesson from this process, it's diversity is a wonderful, wonderful thing in all the ways. Now, anything that is what we call a high green, which would be a 1.7 or higher. So it means it's low in the reactivity, but it's kind of at risk. You can have that. You can eat it, but I just want you to not have it every single day. So you could like rotate it like kind of every other day or every third day. Most of these are going to be probably not a big deal. The one that I see here that will probably be a little bit more challenging is coffee. But the others I'm looking here, like pear, you can probably live without pear every single day, dill, cayenne pepper, some of these are like, you can make.
Cranberry is an interesting one because my kind of drink of choice for lunch and dinner is about like this much cranberry and then sparkling water, right? And it's the real cranberry, so it doesn't even taste that good. The sparkling, sparkling water makes things so much better for some reason. But yeah, so I have pomegranate at the house.
Is a great one. I'm just looking here. You can even do the thing. My kids will do this. They will freeze berries and then puree them, and you can add it. So so you could do that with blueberries, raspberries. You could add a splash of grapefruit. I'm just looking at the things that are the least reactive. I mean, there's lots of different things. So again, you might find some new favorites and then mix it up. Then I would also just say, I have made sure that any supplements I'm recommending to you don't include ingredients that are on here, but I would just pay attention to any other supplements you do. I don't think there will be anything contraindicated, but just keep an eye peeled. It's one of those things, you do become a label reading person.
Fiend.
For all the things, right? You probably already are, but now you will be with a little bit more scrutiny. So that's what we're going to do. And then what I recommend is, after 3 months on the full protocol, then we start to move into retesting mode. Now I don't retest the food sensitivity test. What we do is we start slowly reintroducing foods every 3 days. Again, I love the 3 days because it gives your body the opportunity to have a delayed reaction. And what I do, I don't follow it scientifically. I do whatever you're missing the most. So if at the time for reintroductions, you're like, for the love of God, give me garlic, we go with garlic. And you have garlic, like in all the ways that you would have garlic for a full day. And then you stop having garlic for 2 days and you just watch your body. And 9.5 times out of 10, you feel nothing. It's great. You reintroduce garlic. But sometimes you eat the garlic and then some like symptom, and it can be things like, like sometimes there are these like little really mild symptoms we don't think of as symptoms, and you didn't really notice that it went away, but then you do it and it kind of comes back with a vengeance. You're like, I have like a rash here on my arm. I used to have it all the time. I just got used to it. Now it's like I ate the garlic and it's back. So that would be an indication we need to keep it out for another 3 months and then retry it. But as I said, it's pretty rare that happens. Every once in a while, you'll find a food that the body is just like, not into, but most of the time, we've done the gut healing work. You're able to reintroduce pretty much everything.
Very cool. Well, that's both. This is awesome. I don't know if we're done, but this is awesome. Like, really cool. You're going to send me a list and then like where I get things and all that good stuff.
Yeah, totally, 100%.
Oh, okay. And then we'll reconvene in about 4 months because it'll take a while to get some stuff and all that. I'll have my last engorgements of garlic and ginger, maybe a glass of wine, and then good grape. Yeah, grape was high, yellow, right? Grape was yellow.
Grape is yellow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
No. Grape is red. Grape is
Oh,
red.
it's red.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's not even. Don't have a glass of wine even once every other month. It's
Not at this point. Yeah, but you
yeah.
you can 6 months.
Okay. Well,
Awesome.
this is
So yes,
awesome.
I will send you all that info. And I just also want to say, feel free to reach out if you have questions along the way, or you're like,
Okay.
wait, this happened. Like obviously, and definitely, if anything goes sideways, like you take a supplement, you have a reaction to it, like do not try to DIY it. Reach out. That's what I'm here for.
I did have one other question, right? So I'm taking to increase HCl, I'm taking like 1 per meal for 3 days. If I get to 6, maybe I have some of the warmth on the first day. I do the next 2 days, I'm assuming, and if that warmth goes away or gets worse or like so,
No,
or
you feel
as
the
soon as I
warmth.
feel the warmth.
Yeah, as soon as you
Done.
feel the warmth, you go down.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good. And then I'll send you a note, let you know like where I'm
Okay.
at and what I'm doing. And okay.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Awesome,
Margaret,
Chris.
This
Thank
has been
you.
another amazing episode. I'm excited about this. I know it's a unique case for you because I really don't have a particular challenge, but it's really cool that we're addressing things. Your approach to like, hey, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, right? You're trying to accomplish maintaining muscle mass and potentially increasing muscle mass in my case, maybe a little bit of joint tenderness. I think this is amazing. So I look forward to getting on the protocol, doing everything, and then again reconvening with you in about 4 months.
Awesome.
If anybody's listening and kind of liked your process, I know they can't get a hold of you, but you train people who walk customers through this process. So how could they find somebody who's going to really give a substantially, if not identical, process to them? How could they reach out to those people?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to restorativewellnesssolutions.com, there's a link to find a practitioner. And we have practitioners in 24 countries around the world. And all of them, this core process that we just went through is the foundational training. So even if they've only done one level of our training, everything that we just went through is what they will have learned how to do. So if any of this calls to you, speaks to you, these are fantastic clinicians. And they, a lot of them work virtually as well. So it can be somebody who's close to you, but it also doesn't have to be. And you can see they put little explanations of other, areas of specialty. So if there's something specific going on for you, if there's like a hormone issue or metabolic health or cardiovascular or autoimmune or whatever it is, you can find people who specialize in that area, and they can do this. And we're going to be hosting a clinical success showcase where you can see other examples of this, especially with people who have had more significant issues. So deep, much more progressed in terms of illness of different sorts. So it's a 4-day event from June 2nd to June 5th, and then we have a VIP upgrade day on the 6th, on the Friday. Each day we have a different member of our instructor team teaching a case. They're going to do a deep dive and really kind of like what we did here. We're going to open the kimono in terms of their clinical process. They're going to walk you through their thinking, how they're making these decisions, what they're recommending. And you're also going to see the follow-ups, what happened with these cases, any challenges they ran into, how they worked through them. So whether you are a practitioner looking to do this kind of work yourself, or if you're someone who's just really interested and you'd love to sort of sit in on that clinical process and understand how these top level practitioners are doing this work, it's going to be fantastic. So we'll make sure that you get all the links, and would love to see you there. It's a free event, so would love to see you there.
Excellent. So that's going to be June 2nd through 5th with a VIP day on the 6th. So awesome. Well, reach out to go to our website, right? Go to Margaret's website and find a practitioner. How many languages do you have practitioners practicing in?
We only teach in English. We do get requests, but we have a lot. Our biggest additional countries, we have a big population in Australia, New Zealand, actually had a lot of clinicians there, Canada, throughout Europe, some in Latin America, a smattering through Asia. I think we have some in Kuwait. It's it's impressive, the folks
That's
from all over
awesome.
the world. So,
And
but I can't tell you what languages, unfortunately.
I like they can connect in with anybody. Like you've seen this process. We haven't met, right? Like in person, other than at a party. Like that was fun for this process. So yeah, you can connect with any practitioner who kind of speaks to you. And great. Well, until the next podcast, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.